southbound between Reagan Tollway and the Grand Avenue curve. Westbound Reagan Tollway, traffic still a bit tight approaching Findlay after a collision. And the northbound Veterans Memorial has a delay from 71st to Reagan Tollway. The Edens runs 19 minutes, Lake Hook to Montrose, outbound 21. Kennedy, 40 minutes, O'Hare to downtown, outbound, it's 50. The Eisenhower, an hour and 7 minutes, 390 to downtown. Stevenson, 51 minutes, 355 to DuSable Lakeshore Drive. I'm Jim Alamonte on AM 560, The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast with our AccuWeather meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Partial sun, humid day. High today, 84. Tonight, partly cloudy, humid, low 70. Sun and clouds, humid tomorrow. Thunderstorm in the afternoon, the high 84. Sunny, warm, and humid Thursday, a thunderstorm with a high near 88. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
67 at O'Hare. Next news, 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560 The Answer.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. The reason government, one of the reasons government continues to expand uninterrupted, no matter performance, no matter sector or program, is because every piece of legislation signed that includes more spending or a new program is reported as helping someone get something. It's always an unalloyed good, whatever the government is doing. So think about this in the context of the Green New Deal 1.0, which the politicians call the infrastructure, 1.2 trillion in infrastructure spending. That's what they call it. Well, but America's roads and bridges. And of course, there's no institutional memory. There's no recall. There's no, gosh, have we been here before? We've been here many times before. How did it work out the last time we went for this pitch? About as well as it worked when Springfield was poised to buy the monorail from the Phil Hartman Music Man character. So Kevin Lewis points us to this study out. Kevin Lewis, who's a Boston Globe columnist and an MIT physicist, if I'm recalling correctly. A paper by a member of the St. Louis Fed, board member at the St. Louis Fed, looking at the shovel-ready Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, which provided $28 billion to state governments for improving, say it with me, roads and bridges. Shovel-ready projects, $28 billion, 2009. What did we find after people stopped paying attention? How much money are we going to distribute? $28 billion. We're going to rebuild roads and bridges. That's the press release. Stop thinking, pay no attention, never connect the inputs to the outputs. Well, you've got some economists who do so. And it's quite interesting, the things they find. They're rather instructive for not repeating the same mistakes, if anybody would care to pay attention. The number of structurally deficient or functionally obsolete bridges was nearly unchanged. The number of workers on highway and bridge construction did not significantly increase. The annual value of construction put in place for public highways barely budged. The researcher here demonstrates that Recovery Act highway grants, as governments spent the highway grant money, many did what? Same thing we were talking about with Ted Dabrowski. Oh, I'm getting money over here dedicated to this project. Well, then I'll take it from the money I had dedicated to that project and I'll spend it elsewhere, and we'll grow the pie of spending. Shrink the pie of money you get to keep, since it's all your money. So what happened? As states and localities got highway grants, the quote-unquote infrastructure grants, They slashed their own contributions to highway infrastructure to free up state dollars, local dollars for other uses. The researcher here, the state's receipt of Recovery Act highway dollars had no statistically significant causal impact on that state's total highway spending. Thus, the amount of actual highway infrastructure investment following the act's passage was likely to be very similar to that under a no stimulus counterfactual. We just spent $28 billion. They took $28 billion collectively is going to go to roads and bridges. Okay, well, then we'll repurpose the collective $28 billion to expand other state programs. The last thing we're going to do is reduce our mission, conserve our resources. We're not going to do that. And so that was $28 billion then in a, what was it, $700 or $800 billion package. So now you'll see the same thing in 2021 if Nancy Pelosi lets it go through the House. It'll just be a little bit bigger. And that's how government grows. And that's how 19 Senate Republicans sign on. Because who's against roads and bridges? And that sophistry sells. It's sad. For more on this and other matters, we're pleased to be joined by Joakim Book, visiting scholar at the American Institute for Economic Research. Joakim, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be with you guys. Always entertaining.
We try. And I mean, so just comment. I mean, you know, we have just attempted to throw it collectively. What was it? $4.7 trillion against the wall to see if anything sticks in the last couple of weeks. Yeah. That's significant. And how do Republicans and Democrats get away from this? More or less, I think, like I said, but I get your reaction as well.
Yeah, I like this. It wasn't too long ago that we were talking about government spending in the billions, like you mentioned in 2008 and now we're talking about the government spending in the trillions, and nothing has really changed, right? Like it's the same old game. It's the same old, waving of the emergency of something that really has to be done right now, and then spend as much money as you possibly can. Sure enough, the U.S. economy is bigger than it was in 2008, and there are slightly more people, but it's not like it's not a factor of 1,000, right, from billion to trillion. This is just how government operates.
Well, even when it shrinks, we were just talking about this with another guest in the last hour. Even when it shrinks, as, say, 100,000 students leave the Chicago public school system, the budget increased. The hiring increased. They're hiring 2,000 more employees for 100,000 fewer students. So, I mean, this is just the growth of the individuals you're serving is almost irrelevant to those in charge in terms of the expansion of what they control.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't new either, right? Like if a government department doesn't spend all of its money, it gets its budget cut for the next year, right? So there's always an incentive for government officials to spend as much as possible and max out their budgets and always claim that they don't have enough resources to do what they're supposed to be doing. And I always find that curious, like politicians are always screaming about reform. We need to reform this, we need to fix our broken this. And it's always the areas that they're in charge of. It's like, why do you guys need to reform something that ostensibly is your responsibility and was your responsibility 10 years ago and was your responsibility 5 years ago? And still, you're not either neglecting to do what you're supposed to be doing or you're inventing reasons to do it. Like, this is madness.
And you wrote about sort of a similar dynamic that's at play with COVID response, the race to win COVID infinity. But anyway, I like the portmanteau there. This is what they do with our liberty as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to be funny with COVID and infinity there. I don't know if it worked out so well.
It's pretty good.
But yeah, like, so this is the thing with emergencies and governments doing something very quickly and very on a large scale like this. It's fast enough to be unique, but it's slow enough for people to sort of sleepwalk into it and forget your past, So like, I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, it was like all the reasons for why government had to do the things that they did were very clear. We had to like flatten the curve for the hospitals, and we need to make sure that, our hospital systems didn't get overrun 2 weeks for the NHS in the UK and things, right? Stuff like that. And then if you look back over what happened over the summer last year, over the fall last year, in the winter of last year, and then the spring this year, we've just shifted the entire narrative, just shifted the goalposts. It isn't about the hospitals anymore. Back last spring, it was, we just need to hold out for a little bit before we have vaccines, right? And then when we have vaccines, and like even for countries that have, 70, 80% of their population vaccinated, basically can't get much higher than that. And they're still saying, no, this is unique, and we need to shut down societies and prevent everybody from doing what they want to do because this is so dangerous. And it's like, hang on a second, not more than a year ago, you guys were saying we're doing this for emergency reasons right now, only briefly until everyone's vaccinated. Now everybody is, and you're still doing it. Like you just shifted the goalpost the entire way, and you just the problem gets smaller and smaller, but you kept using the exact same tool and the exact same solution for the problem that you imagined. This is crazy.
Yeah, and here in Illinois, our governor has signed 19 months in a row, an emergency order, and we don't have a public health emergency right now. Our hospitalizations are excellent. Our death rate from this is the lowest it's been since this entire thing began. But why do you think they're keeping it going? Why are they pushing a narrative rather than the science and the data?
Oh, wow, science. If you want to be cynical about this, I don't think the numbers that you just mentioned matter. It's like nobody cares.
They don't matter.
Or at least not if you're, at least not if you're in policy making, or if you're in politics, or being a health czar. You don't really, like, you're grasping at straws to maintain the power that you're so high on using right now, and you want to keep going for as long as you possibly can. Yeah. And to some extent, it's like, we don't have to be conspiratorial here and think that these people are particularly evil. Like, I think this is just an outcome of what happens if you're hyper focused on one thing. You don't really pay any price for being wrong, or pay for your mistakes, or have consequences when you do something wrong. And you're just like looking at this one thing without raising your gaze and seeing what else it does to society.
Well,
I think that
it's just unbounded, and there's no self accountability, and those are character flaws.
Absolutely.
You may not have, you may have good intentions. I really don't care. You've got major character flaws. And another example of this too, what you were speaking about, and what Amy was speaking about, these statistics. Now think about it the other way. Alex Berenson had a good write up at his Substack, and he's got all kinds of screenshots, headlines. New York Times from February of this year. When could the United States reach herd immunity? It's complicated, but they ultimately come down. We could reach herd immunity threshold by May if we can increase the pace of vaccinations to 3 million shots per day. Well, that was reached shortly after this was published, and we're well past May. And the concept of herd immunity is even discussed. In fact, they purposely mislead the public on this topic by talking about 90 million Americans who are unvaccinated, with no consideration to the number of people who have natural immunity, who have been infected and survived the infection, like the 99.8% of other people who were infected and survived, and now have immunity that's as strong or stronger than the vaccinations. That's not included. So it's not just moving the goalposts. It's not just forget what we said yesterday or a month ago or 3 months ago. It's we're not going to tell you the whole story, and then it becomes purposeful. If you're not going to give me context, then there is something ulterior and, frankly, less than redeeming. The good intention default evaporates.
Yeah, I agree with you that I probably don't think most of these people in charge have good intentions deep down. They're very good at playing a role, House of Cards style.
Yeah, right.
That they do have good intentions, but I don't think they really do. But even so, like you also said, I would rather analyze what people are saying on the presumption that they are serious and are genuine. At least give them a break. But even when you do that, it doesn't make sense. Like, you're just shifting the goalposts. You're inventing new stories. You're changing government official doctrine on no change of underlying information or evidence at all. In everything from masks to effectiveness of lockdowns to vaccines and things like that. It just for the life of me, I can't understand how we as societies how we sleepwalked into a situation like this. Like 2 years ago, right? If somebody proposed this to anybody, It's like, oh yeah, the Western world is going to lock down like an authoritarian nation and do this and that and restrict people's liberties, people would laugh at you. Like, no, of course not. We're a good, free, democratic society. We have rights. That's never going to happen. Nobody's going to allow them. We'd have pitchforks on the streets. No, we don't. And people want this. The Economist ran a survey asking a bunch of people in the UK what policies they wanted enacted after the pandemic had ended. And they asked them, do you want, until we have it under control or until there are no more COVID or permanently, even if COVID is extinct. And, the numbers are just crazy. It's like almost half the respondents want to have proof of vaccinations even after COVID for all kind of foreign travel. Something like a third of people want casinos and nightclubs permanently closed and 10 p.m. curfews for everything. It's like, we have a third of people in the UK are complete autocrats.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look
at Australia.
Well, how about look at New Zealand today? New Zealand is locking down. It was today again. One case.
They locked down for one
case in New Zealand, and they're on lockdown. So we know that. And so you're right about the autocratic impulses of the constituents that drive the autocratic impulses of the politicians. But I wonder too, since you're a native of Sweden. So you and Amy can talk Swedish for this part if you want. But I mean, it's the handle on Sweden is there's more of a trust relationship between the government and the citizen, and this is why Sweden could take a light touch. They have more faith in the decision making of their citizens. Is that what distinguishes Sweden from the United States in terms of how the two countries have respectively approached this?
No, I've written about this a lot, and there's a lot more than that differs the U.S. from Sweden. But to make the issue even clearer, Sweden has had initially at least a very different approach than its neighboring countries, Denmark and Norway or Finland. And those countries share most of the same cultural or public policy traits that we would consider. Trust in authorities, stable welfare state, high taxes, the Nordic ideal, right? So there is clearly something else going on in how Sweden operated. And I think basically and it's also become a myth by now. So by the time basically the international media caught up and realized that Sweden was not doing what the rest of the world was doing, Sweden started to change. I think December last year, they started to invoke the same kind of lockdowns and restrictions that Denmark and Norway and other countries had done. And there isn't that much of a difference between Sweden and its neighboring countries anymore. But international media has sort of